Each morning when you wake, remind yourself you are rising to do the work of a human being. Marcus Aurelius. Most people begin a period of self-change, chasing a feeling. They want a surge of motivation. They want a clean break from the person they have been. They want to feel focused, disciplined, and powerful as fast as possible. But Stoicism asks for something deeper than a strong emotion. It asks whether you can become steady. For the next 90 days, can you direct yourself instead of being directed by comfort, irritation, praise, fear, or impulse? Can you stay aligned with what is right when you are tired, overlooked, frustrated, or pulled toward what is easy? That is why the words of Marcus Aurelius still carry so much weight. According to Encyclopedia Britannica, Meditations was not written to impress an audience or build a reputation. It was a private record, written while he was carrying the strain of war and the burden of leadership. A way of returning himself to clarity and discipline in the middle of real pressure. Source: Meditations, Encyclopedia Britannica. That context matters because it means these ideas were not formed in comfort. They were practiced in difficulty. They came from someone who understood that the real battle is not only against events, but against the inner weakness that events can expose. So the next 90 days, through a Stoic lens, are not about becoming more intense on the surface. They are about becoming more grounded at the core. They are about learning how not to be dragged around by every mood, every opinion, every setback, and every moment of discomfort. They are about building a life with more order, more restraint, more honesty, and more inner stability. 1. Cut off the habit that makes you lose respect for yourself. Not all bad habits damage you in the same way. Some waste time, some weaken focus, some make life messy. But there is usually one habit that does something worse than all the others. It lowers your opinion of yourself. Quietly, repeatedly, almost invisibly. It teaches you that your word cannot be trusted, your standards can be bent, and your inner life is easier to betray than to protect. That is the habit you need to deal with in the next 90 days. It may be lying when the truth feels uncomfortable. It may be promising something and not following through. It may be scrolling late into the night until your mind feels dull the next morning. It may be speaking badly about people when they are not there. It may be escaping into pleasure whenever pressure shows up. It may be avoiding the difficult task you already know matters. The form is different for each person, but the effect is the same. You begin to feel divided inside. One part of you knows what is right. The other part keeps choosing what is easier. After a while, that split becomes your normal state. This is why the first step is not trying to rebuild your whole life at once. That usually fails because it is too vague. Stoicism is far more exact. Find the one habit that makes you feel ashamed when you are alone. Not the habit that sounds dramatic. Not the habit other people would criticize most. The one that makes you feel smaller in your own eyes. Name it clearly. Write it down in plain language. Then make the decision that for the next 90 days, this is the pattern you are going after with full seriousness. A useful sentence is this: I am no longer a person who does this. That line matters because it shifts the issue from preference to identity. You are not saying you will try less. You are saying this behavior no longer belongs in the life you are building. That is a very different posture. It removes negotiation. It removes the fantasy that you can keep visiting the same weakness without paying for it. Then make the daily practice simple. Do not stand there arguing with yourself when the urge comes back. That is where many people lose. They begin a conversation with temptation as if temptation has something wise to say. It does not. The moment you feel the pull, interrupt the pattern in the first minute. Stand up, move to another room. Put the phone down, open the laptop, leave the bed, go outside, change the environment, change the posture. change the action. Break the chain before the mind starts decorating the excuse. Why is this so powerful? Because Stoicism does not begin with looking better. It begins with refusing to betray the best part of yourself. Real strength starts when your private actions stop contradicting your deeper values. The goal is not perfection in 90 days. The goal is to become someone who no longer keeps making peace with what weakens him. When that happens, self-respect returns. Not as a slogan, but as evidence. And once you recover that evidence, you stop needing so much outside encouragement. You trust yourself more. You move with less noise. You feel cleaner inside. That is where real change begins. And it begins with removing one private habit you are no longer willing to defend. For the next 90 days, guard this decision like something sacred. It is 2. Stop reacting immediately. A surprising number of people do not lose because life is too hard. They lose because they react too fast. They get offended too fast. They answer too fast. They decide too fast. They let one moment of irritation become a bad sentence, a damaged relationship, a foolish choice, or a whole day ruined by something that should have stayed small. In many cases, the problem is not the event itself. The problem is that there is no space between what happens and what follows. Everything is instant. Feeling becomes speech. Discomfort becomes attitude. Ego becomes action. That is why one of the most valuable things you can build in the next 90 days is a pause, not a dramatic pause, not a spiritual performance, just a small, usable gap between stimulus and response. That gap is where self-command begins. If you do not create it, your habits will react for you, your pride will react for you, your fear will react for you. And then later, when the heat has passed, you will call it a mistake. But most mistakes were already forming in the first few seconds. This is deeply Stoic. Epictetus warned people not to surrender to their first impression as if it were automatically true. Just because something feels insulting does not mean it is an insult. Just because something feels urgent does not mean it deserves an instant reply. Just because your ego feels wounded does not mean your character has actually been harmed. The first wave of emotion is often loud, but loud is not the same as accurate. So here is the practice for the next 90 days. Anytime something disturbs you, use a simple rule of 3 beats. First, be silent. Do not rush to explain, defend, attack, or prove. Silence is not weakness in that moment. It is containment. It stops emotion from gaining momentum through speech. Second, breathe. One full breath is sometimes enough to prevent a foolish reaction. A few slow breaths are even better. Breathing does not solve the situation, but it lowers the speed of your nervous system so you can respond with more intelligence. Third, ask one question. Is this touching the truth, or is it only touching my ego? That question can save you from dozens of unnecessary conflicts. Think of how often this matters in ordinary life. Someone gives you feedback that feels sharp. Your first urge is to defend yourself. Pause. A message arrives with a tone you do not like. Your fingers want to fire back immediately. Pause. Someone overlooks you, speaks down to you, or treats you as less important than you think you are. Your pride wants to rise up and prove something. Pause. In each of these moments, you are being tested in a very quiet way. Not on intelligence, not on ambition, but on rulership of self. The power of this habit is that it makes you harder to manipulate. When you react instantly, other people can steer you with tone, pressure, praise, or disrespect. Your emotional buttons become handles, but when there is a pause, you become less available to that. You start choosing your response instead of spilling it. You stop giving every passing emotion the authority to define your behavior. That changes everything. It improves relationships. It sharpens judgment. It protects dignity. You do not need to become cold or expressionless. Stoicism does not ask you to feel nothing. It asks you not to hand the wheel to every feeling that enters the car. A strong person is not someone who never gets triggered. A strong person is someone who notices the trigger and does not instantly obey it. For the next 90 days, treat this as daily training. Slow down your first reaction. Protect the first few seconds. Many people think character is revealed only in major crises. Often it is revealed in one comment, one message, one moment of disrespect, and what you do next. Win those seconds, and your whole life becomes steadier. And with enough repetition, the pause stops feeling artificial. It becomes your new nature, calm under pressure, clear under provocation, and less regretful. 3. Let go of the need to be understood. One of the heaviest burdens a person can carry is the constant need to be understood. Not just heard, but fully understood. Fully recognized, properly appreciated, seen in the exact way they want to be seen. A lot of exhaustion in modern life comes from this hidden craving. People do the right thing, then want it noticed. They are misunderstood, then feel desperate to correct the record. They are underestimated, then feel pulled to explain themselves until the other person finally gives them the respect they think they deserve. But life does not move according to that wish. People will misread you. They will miss your intention. They will sometimes judge your actions with very little information. And if your peace depends on fixing every one of those moments, you will live in a permanent state of inner disturbance. This is why one of the most freeing practices for the next 90 days is to loosen your dependence on being understood, not because understanding is worthless, and not because communication does not matter, but because your stability cannot be built on other people reaching the right conclusion about you. If that is where your balance comes from, then your balance is always in someone else's hands. A Stoic approach does not ask you to become passive or voiceless. It asks for something more mature. Speak when speech is useful. Clarify when clarity is necessary. Defend what truly matters when silence would become dishonesty. But outside of that, stop over-explaining. Stop over-defending. Stop narrating your goodness in hopes that someone will finally confirm it. There is a subtle form of weakness in that habit. It gives too much authority to the audience. For the next 90 days, practice reducing unnecessary explanation. When you do something right, let it be right without advertising it. When someone mildly misunderstands you, do not rush to clean it up if the misunderstanding is small and temporary. When someone thinks less of you than you think is fair, resist the urge to immediately prove yourself through words. This does not mean you accept lies or injustice in every situation. It means you stop treating every imperfect impression as an emergency. A useful question is this: am I speaking to serve the truth, or am I speaking to protect my image? Those are not always the same thing. Sometimes what looks like honesty is really self-defense. Sometimes what looks like clarification is really wounded pride asking for repair. And if you pay attention, you will notice how often your longest explanations come from discomfort, not necessity. A very practical way to train this is simple. Once a day, choose one moment where you could explain more, but do not. Someone does not fully appreciate what you did. Leave it. Someone makes a small incorrect assumption about your motive. Leave it for now. Someone fails to praise your effort properly. Leave it. Let one moment each day pass without turning it into a case for the defense. At first, this will feel unnatural. Your mind will tell you that if you do not speak, you are losing ground. But often, the opposite is true. Often, you recover dignity the moment you stop chasing validation through explanation. Then work on how you speak when you do speak. Shorter, clearer, less defensive. There is a big difference between calm explanation and anxious explanation. Calm explanation says what is needed and stops. Anxious explanation keeps adding details, because it wants control over the other person's conclusion. One comes from steadiness, the other comes from fear. In many situations, fewer words reveal more strength. This matters because a life built around being understood is a fragile life. Other people are too limited, too distracted, too shaped by their own wounds and assumptions to be your final mirror. If you keep running your worth through their minds, you will become restless, resentful, and emotionally dependent without even noticing it. You will start performing goodness instead of quietly living it. Stoicism offers a harder freedom. Do what is right because it is right. Speak truthfully when needed. Accept that some people will still not get you. Accept that some will misjudge you for a season. Accept that your character and their opinion are not the same thing. That acceptance is not defeat. It is strength. It is the end of a very tiring form of slavery. So, for the next 90 days, say a little less. Defend yourself a little less. Announce yourself a little less. Let your actions carry more of the weight. Let your silence become cleaner. Let your self-respect rely less on being correctly interpreted. Stoicism does not teach mute living. It teaches freedom from living under the courtroom inside other people's heads. And once you taste that freedom, you become calmer, more grounded, and much harder to shake. 4. Voluntarily do one slightly uncomfortable thing each week. Most people do not become weak because life has been too harsh with them. They become weak because they get too used to being comforted. They avoid small discomfort so often that even ordinary inconvenience starts to feel unfair. A little waiting feels unbearable. A little hunger feels dramatic. A little silence feels empty. A little physical effort feels excessive. Over time, this does something dangerous. It trains the mind to believe that a good day is a day without friction. And once that belief takes hold, character starts to soften. This is why one of the most useful practices for the next 90 days is surprisingly simple. Each week, choose one slightly uncomfortable thing and do it on purpose, not to punish yourself, not to prove that you are hard, not to turn your life into some cold performance. Do it to remind both your body and your mind of something important. I do not need everything to feel pleasant in order to live well. That shift matters more than it seems. A person who can only function when conditions feel nice becomes fragile very quickly. They become dependent on the right mood, the right environment, the right convenience, the right level of stimulation. But real life does not respect those preferences. Traffic happens. Delays happen. Stress happens. Discomfort happens. And if you have trained yourself to resist every minor inconvenience, you will spend much of your life agitated by things that should not have that much power over you. So for the next 90 days, once a week, choose one form of voluntary inconvenience. Walk instead of taking a ride for a reasonable distance. Take a cooler shower than usual. Eat one simple meal without trying to make it exciting. Go outside without headphones. Sit in a waiting room, on a bus, or in a line without reaching for your phone. None of these things are extreme. That is the point. You are not trying to become dramatic. You are trying to become less dependent. This practice has real Stoic roots. Seneca advised rehearsing simplicity on purpose so that if fortune changed, a person would not collapse in panic like someone who had never gone without. He understood that fear grows in people who have made comfort their ruler. When you never choose discomfort voluntarily, every unwanted discomfort feels like a threat. But when you meet small difficulty on purpose, it stops feeling so frightening. You begin to discover that your peace does not disappear the moment ease disappears. The key here is proportion. Choose discomfort that is meaningful, not reckless. This is not about harming yourself or creating unnecessary suffering. It is about removing softness from your reflexes. It is about learning that inconvenience is not injury. A plain meal is not deprivation. A short walk is not hardship. A few minutes of boredom are not a crisis. The modern mind has been trained to escape every empty second, smooth every rough edge, and satisfy every minor craving immediately. This weekly practice interrupts that training, and it changes more than your tolerance. It sharpens gratitude. When you occasionally choose less, you notice more clearly how much you already have. Comfort stops being invisible. Simplicity stops feeling like punishment. Ordinary things recover their value. Water feels enough. Food tastes cleaner. Quiet becomes livable. Waiting becomes thinkable. You stop moving through life like someone who is owed constant stimulation. A good way to do this is to decide in advance. At the start of each week, choose your one discomfort and write it down. Keep it small enough that you will actually do it, but real enough that it slightly resists you. Then, when the moment comes, do not complain internally the whole time. Stay with it. Observe what happens in your body and mind. You will often notice that the discomfort itself is not the hardest part. The hardest part is the protest your mind creates around it. That is valuable to see, because it reveals how much suffering is added by resistance. Over 90 days, this habit makes you steadier. You become less dramatic, less needy, less thrown off by small things. You stop needing life to feel soft in order to feel okay. That is a quiet form of strength. It does not look impressive from the outside, but it changes the way you move through the world. You become easier to live with, harder to disturb, and more able to stay composed when life does not arrange itself around your preferences. That is the real power of voluntary discomfort. It teaches you, in a calm and practical way, that comfort is nice, but it is not your master. 5. Practice telling the truth, especially the small truths. People rarely collapse because of one huge lie at the beginning. Most of the time, they collapse by slowly training themselves to bend reality in small, ordinary moments. They lie to save face. They distort to avoid embarrassment. They exaggerate to feel important. They hide behind excuses to protect comfort. And because each one seems minor, they do not notice what is happening. But something is happening. Every small falsehood weakens the link between what they know inside and what they present outside. That gap is dangerous. Once it grows wide enough, a person can still look functional from the outside while feeling increasingly divided within. This is why one of the strongest things you can do over the next 90 days is practice telling the truth, especially the small truths that daily life keeps tempting you to avoid. Not because brutal honesty is a performance, not because you need to confess every thought in your head, but because integrity is built in ordinary speech. It is built in tiny moments where you can either stay clean or become slightly false for the sake of convenience. Think about how often this shows up. You say you were busy when the truth is that you did not make it a priority. You say you forgot when really you avoided it. You flatter someone with a promise you already know you may not keep. You make your effort sound bigger than it was. You hide your fear behind an elegant explanation. None of this may look dramatic, but it slowly teaches your character a terrible lesson. It teaches you that appearances matter more than truth. It teaches you that protecting your image is more important than standing on reality. For the next 90 days, begin removing those distortions from your speech. Do it in a practical way. Answer more truthfully, more briefly, and more cleanly. If you have not done the task, say you have not done it. If you forgot, say you forgot. If you are afraid, say you are afraid. If you do not want to commit, do not pretend that you do. This may feel uncomfortable at first, because small lies often act like social lubricant. They make things smoother in the moment, but they make you weaker over time. There is also an unexpected relief in simple truth. The moment you stop editing reality to manage how you are seen, your mind gets quieter. You do not have to keep track of what version of events you offered to whom. You do not have to defend your own performance so aggressively. You become easier to trust, not only for other people, but for yourself. And self-trust matters more than most people realize. Once you begin speaking against what you know is true, even in small ways, part of you starts listening with suspicion. Your own voice loses force, your promises lose weight, your inner life becomes unstable. Stoicism takes this seriously because inner unity is one of the foundations of character. A strong person is not merely someone who can endure hardship. A strong person is someone whose speech is aligned with what they actually know, see, and intend. When your words keep drifting away from reality, you do not just create social problems. You lose inner power. You start to feel less solid, less clear, less worthy of your own respect. So, make this a real practice. Slow down before answering. Notice when your first instinct is to decorate the truth. Notice when your mouth wants to protect your pride more than your integrity. Then choose the cleaner sentence. Not the harsher sentence. Not the dramatic sentence. The cleaner one. Over time, that changes you. You become more direct without becoming cruel, more honest without becoming self-righteous, more reliable without needing to advertise it. The goal here is not perfection. It is consistency. 90 days of smaller lies removed from daily life can do more for your character than 90 days of ambitious self-talk. Because truth does not only describe reality, it also shapes the person speaking it. And when you practice telling the truth in the places where lying used to feel easiest, you begin to recover something many people have lost without noticing. A stable self, a cleaner conscience, a voice that carries weight because it is no longer split against itself. That is quiet strength, and it is built one honest sentence at a time, every single day. 6. Stop the habit of useless complaining. Complaining often sounds harmless because it is so common. People do it at work, at home, in traffic, in friendships, online, and in their own heads all day long. But useless complaining is not harmless. It is a very polished form of surrender. It creates the feeling that something has been addressed, even though nothing has actually changed. You speak your frustration, repeat your disappointment, relive the inconvenience, and for a brief moment it feels like action. But it is not action. It is emotional leakage. It drains energy without producing clarity, courage, or movement. That is why this habit deserves serious attention over the next 90 days. The first thing to understand is that not all speech about difficulty is the same. Some speech helps solve a problem. Some speech only broadcasts helplessness. Those are not equal. If you are naming an issue in order to understand it, fix it, or make a wise decision, that is useful. But if you are simply rehearsing what is wrong over and over, with no intention to change your response, then you are not processing reality. You are feeding weakness. You are teaching your mind to circle around discomfort instead of facing it cleanly. That is why the Stoic move here is not emotional suppression. It is discrimination. You have to learn to tell the difference between expression that serves you and expression that drains you. Most people never make that distinction. They assume that because something is sincerely felt, it must also be worth saying. That is not true. A feeling can be real and still not deserve repetition. A frustration can be valid and still become corrosive when you turn it into a daily performance. For the next 90 days, use a very simple rule whenever you feel the urge to complain. Force yourself to choose one of 3 paths. Fix it, accept it, or leave it. If you can improve the situation, then stop circling it and take action. If you cannot change it right now, then accept that reality without constantly arguing with it. If the situation is truly wrong for you and change is possible through departure, then leave it. But if you are unwilling to do any of those 3 things, Then do not keep talking as if repetition itself were strength. Stay quiet and conserve your force. This rule is powerful because it pulls you out of the illusion that speech alone is progress. Many people feel active because they can describe what is bothering them in great detail. But detailed frustration is still frustration, and the more often you rehearse it, the more normal powerlessness begins to feel. Eventually, your language shapes your posture. You start sounding like someone to whom life is always happening, never someone who can respond with maturity. A practical way to train this is to create a visible reminder. Put a small mark on your phone screen, in your pocket, on your wrist, or anywhere you will notice it. Every time you catch yourself complaining in a useless way, make one tally mark. Do not use the mark to shame yourself. Use it to expose the pattern. After 7 days, you will begin to see where your energy has been leaking. You will notice which topics, which people, and which situations repeatedly pull you into speech that changes nothing. That awareness alone is valuable, because what remains vague usually remains unchanged. Then start replacing the habit in real time. When the complaint rises, pause and ask, "What am I doing here? Am I trying to solve something? Or am I just trying to discharge discomfort?" That question can redirect the whole moment. If a solution exists, move toward it. If no solution exists today, practice dignity in acceptance. If the environment is consistently degrading you and you truly have the option to step away, begin planning your exit instead of narrating your misery forever. Stoicism does not ask you to become numb. It asks you not to become addicted to voicing your helplessness. There is a major difference. A calm person can acknowledge difficulty without building an identity around grievance. A strong person can feel frustration without making frustration their most practiced language. Over 90 days, this shift will make you clearer, quieter, and far less wasteful with your mind. You will complain less, act more, and recover the energy that endless dissatisfaction has been stealing from you. That is not silence for its own sake. That is self-respect in verbal form. 7. Do what is right before you. Do what is easy. A lot of lives do not fall apart because people are ignorant. They fall apart because people keep giving the first part of the day to what is easy, and then by the time they reach what is right, they have no courage left. They have already spent their attention. They have already softened their will. They have already fed themselves small comforts, small distractions, small delays, and by the end of the day, the important thing still sits there, untouched. This happens so often that many people stop noticing how serious it is. They think they have a time management problem, when in fact they have a moral order problem. They are giving priority to what asks the least of them. That is why one of the most important practices for the next 90 days is this. Each day, begin with one duty you have been postponing. Not the most exciting task, not the one that gives the fastest reward. The one you know is right, necessary, and overdue. This could be replying to an email you have been avoiding because it is uncomfortable. It could be making a phone call you do not want to make. It could be apologizing to someone you know you hurt. It could be fixing a mistake you have already seen but kept delaying. It could be opening a financial issue you have been refusing to face because looking at it makes you uneasy. The form will vary, but the principle stays the same. Before you taste ease, you handle truth. This matters because avoidance has a hidden cost. It is not only that the task remains undone, it is that every hour you delay it, you quietly confirm a damaging pattern. You teach yourself that discomfort gets to decide your priorities. You teach yourself that if something is emotionally inconvenient enough, it can be postponed indefinitely. That pattern spreads. It moves from one email to one conversation, from one conversation to one responsibility, from one responsibility to whole parts of a life. Eventually, the person is not only behind, they are inwardly weakened. They have made peace with self-betrayal in the name of postponement. So make the practice extremely clear. Every morning, write one sentence. What is the right thing I am avoiding today? Not the biggest dream, not the most impressive goal, just the right thing. Then do that before you reward yourself with anything unnecessary, before the entertainment, before the comfortable ritual, before the endless checking and drifting and warming up and pretending to prepare. The point is not to become harsh with yourself. The point is to restore proper order. Duty first, ease later. This is where Stoicism feels very practical. The right thing is not always dramatic. It is often small, plain, and slightly unpleasant. It may not look heroic from the outside. Sometimes it is just the call you have delayed for 3 weeks, even though you already know you need to make it. Sometimes it is the apology you owe, but do not want to give because it will expose your pride. Sometimes it is the correction you need to make quietly, without applause. Stoicism does not teach a fantasy version of virtue. It teaches that character is formed in these ordinary moments, where you either do what is right or move it aside for comfort. There is also a psychological reason this works so well. The first serious act of the day sets a standard for the rest of the day. When you begin with avoidance, your mind becomes softer and more divided. You carry unfinished resistance inside you. But when you begin by facing the thing you least wanted to face, something clears. You feel less hunted by your own conscience. You respect yourself more. You stop dragging a hidden weight behind every other task. One completed duty can create more inward calm than hours of shallow productivity. Over these 90 days, do not underestimate what this simple order can repair. It can rebuild trust in your own decisions. It can reduce anxiety, because anxiety often grows in the shadow of avoided responsibility. It can make you more direct, more mature, and less likely to decorate your day with busy nonsense just to avoid one honest action. Most importantly, it reminds you that freedom does not come from always getting to do what feels easiest. It comes from no longer being ruled by ease. So each morning, find the duty you have been dodging and bring it to the front. Name it plainly. Do it before comfort gets its turn. This is not about becoming severe. It is about becoming clean. A cleaner schedule, a cleaner conscience, a cleaner relationship between what you know and what you do. And that is one of the fastest ways to become stronger from the inside. 8. Do one good thing without letting anyone know. One of the quietest ways the ego corrupts a person is by attaching itself to goodness. It does not always tell you to stop doing the right thing. Often it tells you to keep doing it, but to make sure it is seen, recognized, admired, or remembered. That is how a good action gets mixed with vanity, and once that happens often enough, you are no longer simply trying to be good. You are trying to be witnessed being good. That difference matters, because if every good thing you do needs an audience, then your character is no longer standing on virtue alone. It is leaning on applause. This is why one of the most cleansing practices for the next 90 days is to do one good thing regularly without anyone knowing. Keep a secret line of decency in your life. Help someone and do not claim the credit. Send a sincere message of gratitude without expecting a reply. Quietly correct a shared mistake. Instead of announcing that you fixed it, give a little time, effort, money, or attention where it is needed, and resist the urge to mention it later. The act itself may be small, but the training is deep. You are teaching yourself that value does not need a stage in order to exist. This matters because the need to be seen can slowly contaminate your motives. A person may still look generous, kind, thoughtful, or responsible from the outside, while inwardly they are becoming increasingly dependent on recognition. They begin to measure goodness by response. If no one notices, it feels less satisfying. If no one praises it, it feels incomplete. If someone else gets the credit, resentment appears. At that point, the action may still be useful, but the inner life is no longer clean. The ego has started stealing from virtue. Stoicism pushes in the opposite direction. It treats virtue as its own reward. You do the right thing because becoming the kind of person who does it is already worth something. The value is not created by public approval. The value is in the action and in what the action shapes inside you. This is a much stronger foundation because it makes your goodness less fragile. It frees you from depending on the reactions of others in order to keep acting well. For the next 90 days, build this into your life deliberately. Do not wait for a grand opportunity. Look for ordinary chances. Hold back from correcting someone publicly when privacy would spare their dignity. Make a contribution without attaching your name to it. Clean up something that affects everyone without turning it into a story about your effort. Offer help in a way that does not create debt. The simplicity matters. Secret goodness does not need to look noble. It just needs to be real. What makes this practice powerful is not only the help it gives others, but the honesty it forces on you. When no one will know, your motive becomes visible. You find out very quickly whether you actually want to do the good thing, or whether you mostly wanted the social reward connected to it. That can be uncomfortable to discover, but it is useful. It shows you where your vanity is still hiding. And once you see that clearly, you can begin to purify it. There is also a special kind of freedom in acting well without display. It quiets the constant hunger to be acknowledged. It reduces performance in the moral life. It gives you back a private relationship with your own standards. You start to experience goodness as something intimate and stabilizing, not something to market. That changes the atmosphere of your character. You become less theatrical, less needy, less tempted to turn every decent act into a subtle advertisement. Over time, this creates a person who is easier to trust, not because they speak more about values, but because they are less interested in being seen as virtuous. Their actions are less inflated, their intentions are less mixed. Their kindness is quieter and therefore often more sincere. This is not weakness or passivity, it is disciplined motive. It is moral strength with less vanity inside it. So, for the next 90 days, keep one stream of hidden goodness alive. Let some of your best actions remain unannounced. Let your ego go hungry there. Let your character grow where no one is clapping. That is how you clean the motive. That is how you remember that what is right does not become more real, because it is seen. And that is how goodness becomes part of who you are, not part of the image you are trying to project. 9. End each day with a fair trial of yourself. Trying to change your life without examining yourself is almost impossible. No one makes lasting progress while living in a blur. If you never stop to look back clearly, your mistakes stay vague, your strengths go unused, and your patterns keep repeating. You may feel busy and sincere, but without honest self-review, you remain largely unknown to yourself. And a person who remains unknown to himself cannot guide himself very far. That is why one of the most important practices for the next 90 days is simple. At the end of each day, hold a fair trial of yourself. Not a dramatic trial, not a cruel one, not a sentimental one, a fair one. Sit down for a few quiet minutes and ask 3 fixed questions. What did I do right today? Where was I weak today? What exactly will I correct tomorrow? These questions sound small, but if you ask them honestly every night, they begin to reshape the way you live. They force the day to become visible. They stop experience from passing through you without instruction. The first question matters because many people only know how to judge themselves through failure. They notice what went wrong, what they lacked, what they avoided, and they skip over what was done well. That is not wisdom. It is distortion. If you acted with patience where you would normally react, note it. If you told the truth when it was easier to protect yourself, note it. If you handled one difficult duty instead of postponing it again, note it. This is not self-praise, it is evidence. It helps you see what is becoming stronger in you so you can keep building it. The second question is where the real work begins. Where was I weak today? Not where was I imperfect in every possible way, not what makes me a terrible person. Just where was I weak? Where did I speak too quickly? Where did I avoid what I knew I should face? Where did vanity enter? Where did I complain instead of act? Where did I choose ease over truth? This question matters because weakness becomes dangerous when it stays unexamined. What you refuse to name, you usually repeat. But the tone here is important. You are not questioning yourself to create shame. You are identifying points of failure so they stop hiding inside the fog of the day. Then comes the third question, and this is what keeps reflection from becoming passive. What exactly will I correct tomorrow? The key word is exactly. Not vague promises, not I will do better, not I will be stronger. Say what you will actually do. I will send the message I avoided. I will pause before answering that person. I will not carry my phone into bed. I will speak directly instead of making an excuse. Specific correction turns reflection into training. Without that step, self-examination becomes another ritual that feels serious but changes nothing. This method works because it combines honesty with steadiness. It does not flatter you, and it does not crush you. Many people swing between self-attack and self-indulgence. One day they are harsh with themselves. The next day they excuse everything and move on without learning. Neither approach builds character. A fair trial does something better. It looks straight, it tells the truth. Then it returns to the work. This is very close to the Stoic spirit, especially in the tradition of Seneca. The point is not inspiration. The point is correction. Real growth does not come from intense thoughts about becoming better. It comes from seeing yourself clearly, adjusting deliberately, and refusing to abandon yourself in the process. So for the next 90 days, do not let the day end in noise. End it in clarity. Ask the same 3 questions. Answer them honestly. Keep the tone clean. No self-abuse, no self-flattery, just truth. Over time, this nightly practice will sharpen your conscience, strengthen your discipline, and make your life less accidental. You will notice patterns sooner, correct yourself faster, and trust your own effort more because it is no longer blind. That is how change becomes real. Not through occasional intensity, but through daily self-confrontation carried out with honesty and enough courage to look at yourself without turning away. The next 90 days do not need to turn you into a machine. They do not need to turn you into someone who looks impressive from a distance or sounds wise in conversation. What matters more is something quieter and more lasting. At the end of these 90 days, you become a person who reacts less blindly, pretends less often, depends less on approval, needs less comfort to stay steady, and stands stronger in the private moments where character is actually formed. That is what real change looks like in the Stoic sense. It is not about adding endless new layers to your life. It is about removing what makes you smaller. It is not about building an image. It is about rebuilding the core. It is not about living with intensity for a few inspired days and then slipping back into the same confused habits. It is about living with enough order, enough honesty, and enough self-command for long enough that even you begin to recognize that the old version of you is losing its authority. If you follow these practices seriously, the result may not look dramatic from the outside at first, but inside, the structure changes. You begin to trust yourself more because your actions stop fighting your values. You become calmer because every mood no longer gets to rule you. You become clearer because you stop wasting energy on appearance, avoidance, complaint, and performance. Your life gets cleaner. Your mind gets quieter. Your standards become more visible in the way you speak, choose, work, and respond. This is why the next 90 days matter. Not because 90 is a magic number. It matters because a period of steady practice is long enough to expose who you have been and long enough to begin becoming someone else. Not through fantasy, but through repetition. Not through slogans, but through conduct. Day by day, you stop feeding what weakens you and start reinforcing what steadies you. Do not approach these 90 days as a challenge to look transformed. Approach them as a chance to become more truthful, more disciplined, more restrained, and more inwardly stable. That is a change worth making. Unlike image, mood, or attention, it stays with you. It becomes part of your structure. Once that happens, your life does not only look different, it is different because you are different where it matters most.